What's going on, guys? We are back with another breakdown of The Wire, this time for Season 1, Episode 4, Old Cases. We've already broken down the first 3 episodes of Season 1. We got the links pinned in the comments section, so check those out if you haven't yet. We ended Episode 3 with the failed raid on the pit. Sure, some arrests were made, but no drugs were found, and it's mainly low-level Barksdale members that got arrested. The most memorable moment of the raid was Bodie clocking Mahone and then subsequently getting his ass jumped into oblivion. So let's get into episode 4. The opening scene is pretty hilarious. We start off in the basement dungeon that the Barksdale unit is working out of. Herc is attempting to move this massive desk through the doorway, but it's stuck. Freamon is working on his antique furniture, but watches with amusement. Carver sees Herc struggling and goes to the other side of the doorway to help. The two men try to move the desk, but it barely budges. Shit. Sidnor and McNulty arrive and offer to help as well. Sidnor works on Herc's side and McNulty goes to Carver's side. 4 grown-ass men try to move the desk, yet it doesn't budge. Lieutenant Daniels arrives and makes fun of them for not being able to move a simple desk through a doorway. He sends Sidnor to the other side and stays on Herc's side to help. We now have 5 men working to move this desk. Carver, Sidnor, and McNulty are on one side, while Herc and Daniels are on the other side. Yet the desk doesn't move at all. All 5 men are exasperated. All of a sudden, Herc says something that pisses everyone off.
Well, at this rate, we're never gonna get it in.
In. Herc was trying to get the desk inside the office, but the other 4 guys assumed that he was trying to get the desk out of the office. Simple communication at the beginning would have solved this problem, but instead they were all working against each other. Freamon is aware of this the entire time and doesn't say a word. Incredible opening scene.
I'd really like to analyze this as a deeper metaphor to the lack of a common purpose and dialogue among the Barksdale investigation team, but I think it's safe to say this is just Herc being a dumbass.
Okay, let's first focus on what happens within the Barksdale gang during this episode. With the recent raids on the pit and Omar's robbery, the Barksdale crew is experiencing some adversity. Let's first see what happens with the members who were arrested during the raids. So we jump over to the courthouse where Kima and McNulty are attending the hearings for the recently arrested Barksdale dealers. The raids on the pit netted mostly kids under the age of 18. As minors, they know that the worst punishment they can get is a brief stint in juvenile hall, so none of them feel the need to snitch to avoid a greater sentence. However, there is one dealer named Marvin Browning who was caught up in the raids. Browning already has a long rap sheet and is a grown man, so these charges could get him another 5 years in real prison. Here is a chance to push him and see if he flips for a better deal. McNulty and Kima press Browning. If he talks about Avon, then maybe he can cut down his 5-year bid. Browning thinks about it, but decides against flipping and says he'll take the years. The Barksdales are scarier than a 5-year bid.
This checks out, like we've seen what the Barksdales are capable of when someone offers info.
Anybody who spend their time witnessing shit, you gonna get got.
5 years of prison or a death sentence, the math is fairly simple. We know the state and the BPD aren't slinging around enough cash for witness protection at the moment, which would have been the only way to get any viable info from Browning.
We then cut to a juvenile detention center where young Bodie is just waking up from his beatdown. One of the guards tells him to get ready and report to his bunk. Bodie looks around and realizes that he's one of the only Westside Baltimore kids in this place. It's mostly DC boys here, and that spells trouble for Bodie. He's now alone and in enemy territory. He looks around and sees all the DC juveniles mean-mugging him. It's clear that Bodie will be getting jumped again the second the guards aren't paying attention. Bodie is a quick thinker though. He sees a mop and grabs it and pretends to be cleaning the halls. Since he hasn't changed into his juvie uniform yet, he can pass as a janitor if he's careful. The other boys silently watch as Bodie makes his way down the hall, and since none of the juvie employees are really paying close attention, Bodie escapes through a side door. Incredible stuff.
2 things. 1, looks like Bodie might be a hooper based on his clothes, probably a guard with a decent handle who can lock up on defense when necessary. Maybe gets into foul trouble once in a while though. 2, shout out to Paul Blart out front trying to spit game to the lady in the pink sweater, totally enabling the slim chance Bodie had to escape. This is one of the first times we've heard much about other territories, but it's safe to assume the West Side type of protection Dee mentioned earlier is pretty necessary. You want friends in a place like this, not foes.
While this is going on, Herc and Carver are driving up to the detention center to have a word with Bodie. Herc is annoyed at them being assigned this job since it's a long drive from Baltimore to the facility. But Carver cheers Herc up. He fantasizes about them pulling up and seeing a terrified Bodie, and then they'll pretend like Mahone is in a coma and make Bodie scared that he may have killed a cop. Bodie will be so afraid and shook that he'll give up everyone in the Barksdale gang, Avon, Stringer, all of them. It sounds all so simple in Carver's head, and once Bodie snitches on everyone, Herc and Carver will get credit for breaking open the case. Unbeknownst to them, Bodie has already escaped and they are driving for no reason at all.
Also wild that Carver and Herc believed that Bodie would roll over on the entire operation like that. It also seems suspect Bodie even knows Avon and Stringer's operations on a level close enough to cause that much damage. These guys are mostly clueless, but they're young guns thinking aggressively. Still, you need them to mature and become assets quickly since they're technically the 5th or 6th most competent pieces of this investigation right now. These two missing Bodie at the intersection is also pretty fitting.
So Bodie finally returns to the pit and everyone is surprised to see him back. Apparently he stole a Toyota Camry and drove himself back. Bodie's got some serious skills, man. Anyways, Bodie is feeling super cocky about his escape, and when he's bragging, he notices Dee laughing at him. This makes Bodie defensive, and he starts challenging Dee, saying that Dee would have still been stuck in juvie. All of a sudden, Dee's expression changes, and he gets very serious. What Dee says next is extremely important. He's got to keep these youngins in check, so he first brings up that he's actually caught a body before, and he did 8 months in city jail. Being the young, brash, defiant teen that Bodie is, he responds to Dee saying, "Yeah, you got the one body," as if only having one murder isn't enough to make you feared in these streets. The response gets Dee even angrier, and he says, "Yeah, the one you know about," implying that Dee has committed more murders. The young boys get quiet, and now Dee goes into storytelling mode. According to Dee, Avon used to date this super hot chick who lived in these apartments out near the east side of Baltimore County. Things were fine until this girl found out that Avon was seeing tons of other girls. She knew enough about Avon's drug business, and she threatened to tell the police if Avon didn't cut off his other girls. Now this woman becomes a liability, so Avon needed her to be dealt with. Dee says that his uncle sent him to her apartment, which was right on the ground floor. Dee has the 45 on him, and it's about 3 in the morning, so completely dark outside. Apparently, Dee pulled up to her window and started tapping on the window with the gun. The woman only had a bathrobe on, but she turns on the light and walks to the window to investigate the tapping noise. Since it's dark outside and the lights are on inside the apartment, she basically can't see out of the window and has to get very close. While this story is being told, horny ass Poot is only thinking about how this chick is basically naked. Dee doesn't finish the story, but it's implied that he shot and killed her. Poot then asks Dee why he didn't fuck this girl before killing her. Wallace responds appropriately by saying, "There is something seriously wrong with this man, Poot." Anyways, the story is meant to make Bodie respect Dee more, and from the look on Bodie's face, it definitely works. Remember this story that Dee just told, because it's going to be extremely relevant once we move towards covering what the Barksdale unit is doing in this episode.
In this scene, Bodie looks suspicious at first, given that he's back so soon after slugging a cop like that. So that adds another element to why Dee needs to check him immediately. Like Chen mentioned, Dee's got to keep order as well, and Bodie's call out of Dee has been a long time coming. Bodie's shown flashes of disrespect or has questioned Dee's moves really ever since episode 1.
Well, what's up?
The difference between the world Dee was running in versus what the kids in the pit have seen is night and day. It's like he's telling ghost stories based on Wallace and Poot's reaction. Even if Dee is a little soft, he's going to help his uncle out. From Avon's point of view, he probably sent Dee to prove himself or because he considers Dee trustworthy since he's family.
While all this stuff is going on at the pit, Avon and his executive leadership team need to figure out what to do with this Omar situation. We see them having a meeting over some casual hoops. Avon wants to make an example of Omar. Just like how white people display the heads of animals when they hunt and kill them, Avon wants to do the same with Omar and his crew. He puts a bounty out. $2K for Omar and $1K for any of the young bucks. Stinkum then mentions that one of the Barksdale enforcers, Bird, was in the same jail with Omar in the past. According to Bird, Omar is gay. Side note, we see Stinkum's face is still pretty bloody and bruised after the robbery. Upon finding out that Omar is gay, Avon doubles the bounty. $4,000 for Omar dead, $6,000 if they can bring Omar to him alive. Weebay and Stinkum leave to get to work. Meanwhile, Stringer tells Avon that he's concerned that there is a snitch in the pit. Dee is doing well and making good money, but maybe one of the young guys are doing something behind their backs.
Plenty of casual homophobia within this interaction, but again, there's a lot of machismo and posturing within organized crime. This is more a function of that system than a bug. You're not about to let a guy rob you without recourse. That smells like weakness, and where others smell weakness, they also sense opportunity. Side note, Wood Harris, who plays Avon, could actually hoop in real life, played for NIU, so there's reason to believe no stunt double was needed during that alley-oop. You can tell he holds Stringer above the others, which loops us right back into that king and queen chess metaphor from last episode.
So now that we've covered what's going on with the Barksdale gang, let's jump over to Baltimore PD and see what they've been up to during this episode. As mentioned earlier, McNulty and Kima are unsuccessful in their attempt to get Marvin Browning to flip, so now they need to find a different way to break into the Barksdale gang. Fortunately for the team, Bubbles is a damn good informant. As he's taking a ride with Kima, he fills her in on the robbery at the pit. He gives her the license plate of the white van that Omar and his crew left in. The plates have been reported to be stolen. Kima doesn't know anything about Omar, and this surprises Bubbles. Omar has a brother nicknamed No Heart Anthony, who has a fierce rep in the streets as well. Kima is unaware of any of this, and Bubbles makes fun of her for it. Kima has to go to class for law school, so she drops Bubbles off with McNulty. Before she leaves, she asks McNulty if he's ever heard of a No Heart Anthony. Turns out McNulty is super plugged in. He knows the exact apartment where No Heart used to live, he knows his real name, Anthony Little, and he knows that he's locked up right now for a robbery. Bubbles is pumped when McNulty recites these facts, and Kima is annoyed and says, "Fuck you both," and leaves. Now we know that Omar's full name is Omar Little.
The fact he has family knee-deep in the rip and run game helps paint a picture behind Omar as well. It's what he knows, and it's a profitable step in the food chain of the West Baltimore drug game. Lack of knowledge on the streets on the part of Kima surprised me a bit here. I feel like the confidence she usually puts off hints at a higher awareness. The only reason McNulty knows is because his knowledge of the case borders on obsession at moments, which is helpful, but it also explains why other parts of his life are pretty unimpressive. You wouldn't think it at first sight, but this dude isn't much different from the other workaholics we see portrayed in prestige television. Family life shaky, but the man knows the game.
McNulty is late to visitation with his kids, so he has to drag Bubbles along to the suburbs. McNulty's son Mikey is playing in a soccer game and seems very fond of his dad. We get a first look at McNulty's ex-wife, Elena, and boy is she fine. Brunette, sexy body, just the right amount of bitchiness, goddamn. She sees Bubbles and doesn't want to shake his hand since he's an obvious junkie. I feel a bit sad for Bubbles in this moment. Anyway, she's mad that McNulty is late for soccer, and McNulty blames the job. McNulty wants more visitation than every other weekend. This leads to an immediate fight, and Elena storms off with a "fuck you." McNulty then drops Bubbles off in the projects later that night, another depressing goodbye.
That "leave it to Beaverland" comment from Bubbles killed me, but he's right. His world and McNulty's are not the same. Bubs at a youth soccer game was the most fish out of water moment the season has offered to this point for his character. Insane move by McNulty to pull up with a CI to a U10 rec game. The drop-off scene was cool for me, like Bubbles puts in this work all day long to return to a niche that he's carved out for himself, sometimes not completely by choice. Back to McNulty's personal life, his wife is played by Callie Thorne, a Boston girl who you might recognize from Rescue Me. She's no stranger to men in uniform who can't get their shit together.
So while the lower level detectives are still putting in work on the case, Deputy Ops Burrell tries to wrap the entire thing up. He stops by Judge Phelan's office and tries to run some game. He opens up by first mentioning a sob story. He tells Phelan that Baltimore PD's DNA trace lab is 25 years old. Recently, their blood sample fridge suffered an electrical issue and samples from 56 homicides and 15 rapes were ruined. Phelan suggests that Burrell reach out to some of the nonprofits to get money. Since Phelan's brother is on the board of one, he could hook Burrell up. Burrell's savviness has just opened the door for Baltimore PD to get more funds. What they'll actually use it on, who the fuck knows. Now it's time for Burrell to present a gift to Phelan. He shows him the outcomes from the recent drug bust on the Barksdale gang. Phelan is no dummy, and he immediately realizes that nobody named Barksdale was actually arrested. Burrell's attempt to bullshit him only pisses him off, and Phelan tells Burrell that there's much more work to do on this case.
Yep, Burrell tried his best. He pulls up with these results like the time I tried to counterfeit the 50 I got on a math quiz to an 80. My mom wasn't buying that shit, and neither is Phelan. What he doesn't like is the mockery the Barksdales have turned his courtroom into. No heads have been cut off the snake. The crew will keep getting witnesses to recant testimony with ease if this is all the force or pressure the BPD can apply on them. The lack of funds for refrigerating evidence samples is only a microcosm of the BPD's dilemma. There are simply too many holes in this organization. There's a funny moment later in the episode where McNulty gets a call from Phelan, where Phelan seems like he's seeking reassurance from Jimmy, and Jimmy just sort of gives him the treatment before hanging up. Part of me thinks Phelan sees working with McNulty as recapturing a young cavalier version of himself. He seems to seek McNulty's approval often for a guy as high up as he ranks.
After being rebuffed by Phelan, Burrell calls Daniels in again to see where they're at with the Barksdale case. Daniels says he's waiting for orders from Burrell on how he wants this to go. He even tries to slyly suggest that Burrell could find someone else to handle the case. Burrell gets annoyed that Daniels is trying to weasel his way out of handling the case. Daniels responds by saying this case needs more resources, and according to McNulty, they most likely need a wiretap. So much for quick and easy.
Daniels is in that team player mode again, knows where his bread is buttered, he loved to get off this deal after that bust disaster. This man is not having a great time. Oddly enough, the scene closes with McNulty finally gaining some influence.
McNulty says this case needs a wire. You think he's right?
Speaking of McNulty, we see him back at Homicide looking through some old murders to try and tie them to the Barksdale gang. He's complaining to Bunk about how the Barksdales got every potential witness in West Baltimore afraid to testify. Sergeant Jay Landsman pulls up and tells him that he's found a murder from 6 months ago that potentially ties to D'Angelo. The victim was a college girl named Deirdre Kresson, who was shot and killed in her own kitchen. Her apartment is northeast of the city, so not remotely close to the West Baltimore projects. Witnesses mentioned that she was spotted with a man named D on the night of the murder. McNulty thinks the connection with D is very flimsy and doesn't want to waste time on non-Barksdale related murders. Side note, this is basically the murder that D was bragging about to Bodie, Poot, and Wallace earlier. As of now, we don't actually know if D did the murder or if he was taking credit for it just to look more fierce in front of the youngsters. Right now, McNulty is claiming that 10 to 12 murders over the last few years can be tied to the Barksdales. However, only one of those murders has been tasked to Landsman's squad. Remember, both McNulty and Bunk are part of Landsman's unit. Since McNulty is now working the Barksdale case, his regular homicide squad has to pick up his slack. If McNulty solved this case, their squad will only get one murder clearance out of it. Basically, McNulty will have been solving murders for other units, while his own unit barely gets any credit. This argument convinces Bunk as well, since he's been helping pick up the workload left by McNulty's absence. McNulty knows that Landsman is right, so he has no choice but to agree to look into the Deirdre Kresson murder. Bunk wonders why they can't just dump this murder on Santangelo. Santangelo is in a different unit in Homicide, but he's still murder police and he's technically on the Barksdale Detail as well. But McNulty says that he has no idea where Santangelo has been. Another detective in their unit, Keeley, was the man who originally caught the Kresson murder, but according to Bunk, Keeley has done an absolute shit job on this murder. All they've got are a few photos and a note saying, Tawanda called NFD. There is a callback number, but when Bunk calls, the number has been disconnected.
Back to McNulty covering for Santangelo, that's just another indicator that he's loyal to those on his level. The only people he generally screws over or goes behind the back of are his superiors, which actually bodes much worse for his future, as we'll find out later in the episode. But hey, he does get to maintain his status as just one of the guys. Landsman is the gift that keeps on giving. I love this guy. The mannerisms, the turns of phrase, it's hard to hate him despite how punchable his face is.
Atta boy. He's my son.
Bunk and McNulty having to play cleanup for Keeley is just another moment in 1 step forward, 2 steps back. There's always someone to make up for or cover for within the BPD, which makes the actual police work somewhat impossible.
Bunk and McNulty pull up to the apartment complex where Deirdre was murdered. Neither of them are particularly happy about being asked to investigate this case. As they are walking towards the apartment, McNulty asks Bunk about Lester Freamon. This is the first time Bunk has heard that Lester Freamon is on the Barksdale unit, and Bunk immediately speaks highly of Lester. According to Bunk, Lester Freamon is no hump. The antique furniture that he works on all day, he sells that for more money than McNulty's annual detective salary. Freamon is natural police and used to work in Homicide. McNulty wonders why Freamon left, and Bunk says, "Go ask Freamon yourself." Now, this upcoming scene between Bunk and McNulty is absolutely legendary and demonstrates their true prowess as detectives. We could spend an entire video breaking this scene down, so we'll actually save that for a separate video. Just stay tuned on our channel because we'll be dropping that soon. To summarize, McNulty and Bunk enter the apartment and within minutes figure out how Deirdre was killed, where the shot was fired from, where the bullet fragment ended up, and where the shell casing landed. Although they still don't know who the murderer is, knowing which weapon was used makes the case ripe for solving. The second they can find someone with that same weapon, the case is closed. Oh, by the way, they do this while primarily communicating with each other using the word fuck and all of its variations like motherfucker and fucking A. Like I said, we're dropping a separate video where we do a deep dive on that scene, so stay tuned. So let's talk about the pagers, since they represent a major breakthrough in how the Barksdale unit can work this case. Remember, in the previous episode, the police raided the pit but came away with no drugs. Fortunately, Lester was observant and found a pager number on the wall of the stash house. We now see Lester scoping out the pit where Dee is watching Bodie disable a security camera. Lester dials the number and waits to see who checks their pager. It ends up being Dee's pager. Lester watches Dee walk to a nearby payphone and call Lester's cell phone. Lester picks up as Dee asks, "Yo, who this?" But Lester just hangs up and says nothing. Lester has now figured out what Dee's pager number is, which will be huge for the team. Dee is a bit sketched out by the ghost call, but he doesn't think too much of it.
Lester, an elite scout here.
Gotcha, bitch!
We'll learn more about him later, but it's clear that he's been something of an underachiever up until he heard the tip-off about Avon and the Golden Gloves last episode. The fact that this case is such a challenge, is tied to so many bodies, and that Lester sees a worthy opponent might factor into this. If he's truly been more focused on miniatures than homicides, this unit is his first chance to shake off the rust. Plus, he knows that detectives like Kima and McNulty are taking this shit seriously. It's always easier to lock in when you're with like-minded people, and this ain't no overtime grift. Sorry, Pokin' Mahone.
We then see McNulty and Kima walking towards the office while discussing how to obtain a Title III to clone the pagers that the Barksdales are using. In the previous episode, McNulty discussed this with Rhonda Perlman, and he's now holding the paperwork requirements for what a Title III would need. Kima is open to the idea, and McNulty says that she should bring it up to Daniels since McNulty himself is in the doghouse right now. Kima is still bothered by not knowing who No Heart Anthony is, so she asks McNulty about him. According to McNulty, No Heart sold drugs back in the early 90s. A few years back, No Heart was trying to rob a jewelry store, but fucked it up and ended up in a police chase. He didn't want to go back to jail, so he shot himself in the chest with a .44, but the bullet didn't kill him. So No Heart wakes up in the ER and gets the nickname No Heart. The discussion then moves to the pit robbery. Kima says that Bubbles is blaming Omar for the robbery. Since Omar is in the business of robbing drug dealers, he most likely has a weapon on him at all times. Kima and McNulty guess that if they can just find Omar and search him, he'll have a gun on him, and then they can use that gun charge to get more information out of him. The two of them finally make it to the office, and we see this hilarious scene where Polk is getting ready to jump off the stairs and get his way into early medical retirement just like his buddy Mahone. We'll touch on that more a bit later when we talk about the side stories in this episode. Anyways, McNulty and Kima arrive just as Polk is getting ready to fall, and he awkwardly backs off as they walk right by him.
Omar, coming from a family of stick-up men, points to a theme from this season too. The closer your family is to crime within the streets, the closer you start to it as well, especially if that family member happens to be your older brother, an incredibly formative presence. If Omar's idol growing up was No Heart, things are starting to make a lot of sense because some of the best characters in The Wire are often forged in tragedy. I took this scene as Kima starting to think a little more like McNulty now. She's getting creative and looking for ways to get further with less. That being said, you might have better luck fighting a grizzly bear than catching and getting someone like Omar to roll over.
Daniels then rounds the troops up to figure out what's next. Santangelo is curiously missing, but McNulty covers for him and says that he's got a case he's working on. Daniels says that he hasn't heard anything from the higher-ups yet, so they should press on with the case. He's open to any ideas from the team on where to go next. Kima speaks up. Many of the Barksdale members that they arrested in the raids had pagers on them. She suggests that they try and clone a few of these pagers and see where it takes them. There's still a lot of confusion on why the Barksdales are using pagers. The gang makes a ton of money, so why not just use cell phones? Also, pagers only send numerical messages, typically a number to call back on. So how does the gang really communicate with these things? This is where Lester Freamon steps in and continues to surprise the team with more elite police work. Freamon says that the pagers are useful since they can't be bugged by police. He then uses Dee as an example of how the Barksdale gang is using these pagers. Let's say Dee gets a message on his pager. His pager would then show some sort of numerical code, a set of numbers. Now these numbers could be the actual number to call back, or it could be a code that tells Dee which phone number to call. Dee would then go to a nearby payphone and dial that number, and that's when the real communication would begin. Lester has already followed Dee and tested out this theory, and he's got photographs to prove it. He's got Dee's actual pager number, so they already have a pager that they can clone. The last thing they'll need to do is prove exhaustion. They already did the raids and nobody flipped. They don't have any informants who work within the Barksdale organization. All they gotta do now is to try and follow one of the Barksdale guys and lose them. It won't even be that hard since the Barksdale people can just go into one of the towers at any moment and disappear. Daniels is convinced and says, let's do this.
The McNulty, Kima, Freamon big three becomes very obvious in this episode. These three now have a common vision on how to crack the case. Kima is Daniel's confidant, but she's tight with McNulty now, so that's a wash. McNulty is definitely the quote-unquote bad kid your parents didn't want you hanging out with outside of school. Freamon lends more of an adult-in-the-room vibe that I think Daniels appreciates.
Kima sets up the plan with Herc, Carver, and Sidnor. They plan on following D'Angelo around, and then eventually when D goes into one of the towers, they'll lose him. Documenting this experience will allow them to fulfill the final requirements of exhaustion and get the permission to clone a pager. Herc is pretty fucking stupid though, so he doesn't really follow what's going on. Why follow D if you know you're gonna lose him? Kima begs with Herc to just follow the plan, and he obliges. Alright, we've covered the major plot of this episode, but there are still some important side stories to mention. Let's start with what Omar has been up to. After the robbery, we see Omar's crew chilling. They've made a nice chunk of change and still have some drugs left over from the recent score. Omar isn't that upset about his name being mentioned in the robbery, since his name is already known. He's more worried about enemies being able to track down his associates, since they now know that these younger guys are running with Omar. A young mom named Shirley is holding her baby and comes up to Omar and says that her check is late. Omar is gentle to the baby, and he tells a young boy nearby to hook Shirley up. Now, I'm not sure if Shirley is actually a drug fiend and is getting heroin, or she just needs cash, or she was going to use her check to get heroin and Omar is just hooking her up with some drugs for free. Either way, it's a dark fucking scene. Also, it's clear that Omar has a romantic relationship with the lighter-skinned boy. We don't know if he's got a relationship with the other guy, but he does touch his shoulder in a very suggestive way.
Yeah, Omar's a very unique character. The man's a natural outlaw. Mild homophobia toward Omar and Brandon's situation would definitely check out in this setting. Think of the culture associated with the drug game in the early 2000s. Very masculine, not exactly a vision of social progress. Omar is Robin Hood-like in some ways too. He usually takes from those near the top of the economic order in his environment. In 2002, creating a gay character who was this sort of a badass figure in this particular setting was groundbreaking. He's easily a top 3 character in the show for me, and it's actually inspired by several stick-up men including Donnie Andrews, Billy Outlaw, and others. Ed Burns, one of the screenwriters with David Simon, had actually arrested some of these very same guys as a cop. Donnie Andrews is the strongest parallel, and Billy Outlaw was rumored to be gay. As a side note, Kima was also inspired by female police officers who are openly gay that Simon knew when covering the BPD as a reporter. Shout out to Simon and Burns for building a world that mirrored the one they knew so well.
Another funny side story involves the recently beat up Patrick Mahone. So Mahone is in the hospital because apparently Bodie's punch sent Mahone to the ground so hard that Mahone suffered a C6 spinal fracture. He should be somewhat fine in the long run, but this serious workplace injury provides the perfect chance for Mahone to retire early and get 66% of his pension. Insane. Mahone's already got his retirement plans figured out. His brother-in-law has a video rental store that does $6,000 a week in regular rentals and an additional $8,000 a week in porn. Mahone is going to be his partner. Damn, man, that store is doing roughly $700,000 in annual revenue, and this is by early 2000s standards. Mahone takes the scumbaggery even further. He doesn't plan to report any of the video store income since the department would subtract it from his pension. Credit to this animal for using the system. Maryland's tax dollars hard at work. Daniels doesn't really know what to say. He half-heartedly tries to convince Mahone to think about it and stay on the force, but we know Daniels is low-key pumped to not have to deal with this liability anymore. Polk is sad that his drinking buddy will no longer be around. Mahone suggests that Polk should try and get injured on the job as well. The stairs leading to the Barksdale unit's office are pretty old and unsafe. If Polk took a small jump off those stairs, he could break a few bones and also retire and get 66% of his pension. Hell, maybe he could sue the city and get a bit more. Polk thinks about this proposition deeply.
Slinging tapes in the adult-only section for under-the-table income after eating that right hook is a very fitting outcome for Mahone. Him gassing up Bodie's punch power will always be a classic one-liner.
Kid hit like a mule, I gotta say.
You can almost see the sorrow from Polk as he puts the pieces together. Who could possibly replace Mahone as his next drinking buddy and BFF?
Started out with a kiss, how did it end up like this? It was only a kiss, it was only a... Now I'm falling asleep, and she's calling a cab while he's having a smoke, and she's taking a drag.
McNulty's spoken for with Bunk. Kima has better things to do. Herc and Carver are definitely chug a beer and rip Jaeger bomb bros. I don't know if you could keep up. Prez would catch a nasty hangover from any more than 2 vodka lemonades. And Santangelo looks like the type of guy who'd order a Coors Light draft and get fussy if there was too much foam on top. Not a lot of great options out here.
Let's also talk about Herc and Carver real quick. After driving all that way to the juvenile center and finding out that Bodie escaped, they are embarrassed as fuck and storm inside Bodie's grandmother's house and loudly search for Bodie. Bodie is nowhere to be found, obviously, but we do see Bodie's grandma, who is quietly folding laundry. Herc takes a look and realizes that they were completely out of line, so he apologizes to Bodie's grandma for the way that they stormed inside the house. To Herc's surprise, Bodie's grandma is unfazed and actually starts telling Herc about Bodie's upbringing. Bodie's real name is Preston, and his mom was caught up in the drug game herself. She died when Bodie was 4, and that's when he came to live with his grandma. She says that even by then, it was clear that Bodie was an angry child.
I love that his grandma goes about the whole situation pretty casually. Herc actually getting the story behind Bodie shows us he might learn something for once. Building something resembling a sense of shared humanity with the community is the key to serving it. Also fascinated with the way that Simon portrays Bodie as a systemic product of his environment. Up until this point, most shows would have simply just shown him as a caricature of a criminal, someone that does wrong simply because they're a bad person, less worthy, or chose the life in the streets just out of the blue. This is much more realistic.
We also get this funny ass scene where Jay Landsman plays the middle manager role to perfection. He pulls up to Rawls' office and acts all humble, only to then launch into an insane story. Landsman says that last night he had a beer in one hand and was jerking off in another, trying to get his penis hard. He's even crass enough to mention that his flaccid penis is 4.5 inches long. This actually gets a chuckle out of Rawls. Landsman says that he was fantasizing about a girl from his childhood, specifically an incident where her top slipped off at a pool party. Right when he was about to get a boner, McNulty popped into his mind, and now the night was ruined. So Landsman is only really here to talk about McNulty, but he employs quite the method to get there. Landsman knows that once this Barksdale case is over, Rawls is probably kicking McNulty off of homicide for starting this whole mess. Landsman starts advocating for Jimmy to stay. First of all, it's not Jimmy McNulty's fault. He's addicted to himself. It's a tragedy. He thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. It's a character flaw. But Landsman says that you can't blame McNulty for being that arrogant. When he first joined Homicide, he was on a different sergeant's squad, and that squad was so dumb that McNulty probably was the smartest guy in the room. The same arrogance that makes McNulty an asshole is also what makes him an elite detective. Last year, McNulty solved 8 murders for Landsman, including one where the body was completely decomposed in the river. Landsman's humble plea works, and Rawls says McNulty can come back in 2 weeks if he wraps up this Barksdale case. Clean slate once he's back.
Landsman, played by Delaney Williams, is one of the most intelligent schmucks around. Tremendous acting job. This guy should be in bigger stuff, honestly. As we mentioned before, Jay Landsman was legit police with the BPD in real life and also an actor. Crazily enough, Delaney beat out Jay in the original audition process for the role of Jay. I would take that kind of hard, I don't know. He's a crafty guy on the low. Introducing the McNulty problem to Rawls by basically just underlining Jimmy's narcissism was great. He knows what people want to hear. In the end, he recognizes McNulty is an asset and gives him a landing pad. This is objectively a good guy move. You can tell he cares for Jimmy a bit even if he'd never admit it. The kind of friend that likes to pick on you but might throw hands if someone else from outside the crew tries it.
We should also touch on Kima's relationship with law school and with her partner Cheryl. From the scenes in this episode, it's clear that the pressure to go to law school is coming from Cheryl. Kima's heart is obviously not in it. Their relationship seems fine for now, but something to keep an eye on.
Kima truly does love being police. You gotta shine a light on her ability to playfully gaslight like crazy as well. Her and McNulty might have more in common than they think. At another point later in the episode, we see McNulty lonely as hell, but sees Kima as sort of a kindred spirit, if you will. These realizations will occur from time to time, such is life after a few too many whiskeys.
Lastly, we gotta talk about our breakout star of this episode, Lester motherfucking Freamon. Out of nowhere, this dude starts locking in and doing elite police work. Combine that with Bunk's high praise of the guy, and McNulty can't help but confront Lester about his sandbagging. McNulty tells Lester, "You're real police, you know what you're doing, but you ain't been doing it." We learn more about Lester's backstory. He's been in the pawn shop unit for 13 years and 4 months. It's boring, mind-numbing clerical work, and it's a waste of Freeman's talents. But Lester didn't ask out of Homicide, he got kicked out for doing real police work. This prompts a smile from McNulty, and he takes Lester out for drinks to hear more about his story. As the two men are downing beers and shots of whiskey, we hear more about what Lester did to piss off his superiors. Back in the summer of 1987, Lester was working a murder involving an 80-year-old woman who was stabbed to death in her bed. Lester worked the case for a few weeks and identified 2 main suspects. Both suspects had their fingerprints found at the crime scene, so the case was pretty much done. However, Lester then figured out that a third person was involved, someone who helped the two suspects sell off the stolen goods. What complicated the matter was that this person was the son of an editor at a well-known newspaper. The deputy ops at the time, who wasn't Burrell, told Lester's major to close the case without implicating the editor's son. Lester could have easily done it, but he opted to do his own thing anyways. He charged the editor's son and made him testify. McNulty wonders why Lester didn't just make the case with the two main suspects. Lester responds by asking McNulty, "Why are you fucking yourself up chasing after Avon Barksdale?" The two men have more in common than they realize. So obviously, after defying his major's orders, Lester got the boot from homicide. A week after the trial, the major asked Lester, "Where do you want to go?" And Lester said, "Anything outside, a foot patrol is fine, just let me get sunshine and do real police work." The major then came back and asked, "Where don't you want to go?" pretending to want to make sure that Lester ended up in a good situation. Lester told him anywhere but an indoor paperwork type of job, and guess where Lester ended up? The pawn shop unit. Goddamn. The only reason Lester is out now is because it's been so long that they've forgotten about him. McNulty and Freamon have a good chuckle, but then Lester gets serious and tells McNulty, "When they ask you where you want to go, and they 100% will end up asking you that because you don't follow orders, keep your fucking mouth shut."
Yeah, he knows McNulty is screwed the same way he once was due to his relentless pursuit. Vice versa, McNulty sees more than a little common ground here. It's part of the reason he's drawn to Lester in this episode. He seems to admire him. Freamon turned out to be another casualty of corruption and the system. One truth we can glean from the show so far is that one person standing up to toxic bureaucracy is a noble cause, but can it get you anywhere? Will there be meaningful change, or are you just wasting time and hurting yourself in the process? Freamon adapted and capitalized on getting screwed over with his miniature operation. The spark was gone, but now the spark has been reignited by Jimmy. Time is ticking though.
So that does it for our breakdown of Season 1, Episode 4 of The Wire. Hope everyone enjoyed it. If you have anything to add, comment below. We'll be back with Episode 5 shortly.